I recently had a back and forth with Father Moses, an Eastern Orthodox priest, on Twitter, or X, as I guess they call it now, about the Western Rite within Orthodoxy. And Father Moses kind of responded in the negative towards the Western Rite as not being a positive movement and not being really truly Orthodox. And I expressed my my strong discouragement on expressing these kinds of sentiments, considering the fact that denigration of the West does no favors for the growth of orthodoxy within the Western world. And Father Moses essentially responded by saying that the West has no culture, to which he was ratioed quite hard by all the people retweeting him and making mockery of the fact that he clearly is a little bit mistaken when it comes to whether or not the West has a culture to boast in. The West built the Christian world. But beyond the post and the sentiment, I wanted to make an appeal to my Eastern Orthodox followers and my Eastern Orthodox friends, and It is really a plight from the heart of an Anglo-Catholic man who genuinely wants to see unity in the church and really truly sees orthodoxy as having a unique ability to bridge a gap and a divide that could really bring unity to the church. So first, I want to say this. I believe as an Anglican that it is essential, important, but even essential, that we be in communion with a historic patriarchate, okay? I don't think that the current situation of having bishops that are not in any sort of historic communion with one of the major sees is sustainable or a good idea. I think at some point that has to happen. That being said, in order for that to take place, there cannot be a sense in which orthodoxy becomes defined by ethnic and cultural grounds rather than theological grounds. And this is probably my biggest disappointment in the widespread hate towards Western Rite Orthodoxy. Is, first of all, Western culture is profoundly robust. Western liturgies are profoundly robust and beautiful. The Book of Common Prayer is one of the most beautiful Western liturgies and Western texts and English texts in general that I think has ever been produced. The Gregorian Mass is profoundly beautiful, and it is ancient, older than a lot of the rites used in the East. And so all of these things are beautiful. All of these things are good. And when orthodoxy despises Western civilization and Western theology to such a degree that they wish to distance themselves from all things, even those things which are orthodox, they shoot themselves in the foot at actually being able to establish themselves as really the source and fullness of the church. It is an anti-Catholic sentiment that is being expressed there. Now, I know people like Father Moses would respond and they would say, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but many of them would respond and say that this isn't an attempt to diminish the good and orthodox nature of the West. It's an attempt to stand against errors of the West. And we as the Orthodox do not wish to compromise and fall into the same errors. But here's the problem. The Western Rite has been received by orthodoxy. It's functioning in parishes with priests who have been ordained and given the ability and permission from their bishops to have Western Rite liturgies and Western Rite parishes. And the funniest part is that a lot of the guys who are opposing it are parts of Orthodox churches like Rokor, which is Russian, which is where people like St. Tikhon came from, who was really the one who pushed for the Western Rite liturgy. My Orthodox brothers and sisters, there are so many Anglicans and Roman Catholics who would in a heartbeat enter into communion with you if you adopted Western liturgies and recognized them for what they are, Orthodox. If you look at the Western Rite, the fact that it has been received is a demonstration of its orthodoxy. There is nothing in the liturgy, there's nothing in the doctrine professed that is contrary to orthodoxy. What you guys are complaining about is a stylistic difference, an aesthetic difference. These are horrifically secondary and do horrific damage to the possibility to evangelize and really rebuild the West. And I do think orthodoxy's rise in the U.S. is in part because people are seeing what I'm seeing, which is that it has real potential to be one of the bulwarks in standing against secularism and rebuilding the Western Church. Western civilization is crumbling, and with it, the Western churches are crumbling because many of them have given into modernity. But this isn't Western culture per se in its purest form's fault. This is the fault of secularism. This is the fault of modernity. This is the fault of the Enlightenment, things which the East didn't go through in the same way. And so the East can speak into our culture and into our life in a way that, in a sense, bypasses many of those issues. But in order for them to do it, they have to be willing to speak in Western language. They have to be able to speak in categories and terms that we as Westerners can understand. They have to be willing to not denigrate the culture that formed all of these men, the culture that we're proud of, the culture that we inherited, the culture that we are sad to see dying. And so long as they demonize it, orthodoxy remains off the table for so many Christians. I believe that many Orthodox Anglicans would be willing to come into communion with orthodoxy if there wasn't such a anti-Catholic bias towards anything Western. I mean, I even hear Orthodox priests not referring to St. Augustine as St. Augustine. They refer to him as Blessed Augustine. That is a disgrace. It is just a disgrace. And this is one of the primary reasons that I remain fully committed to Anglicanism, is because as a Western Christian, I cannot join a tradition that actively spits upon that which I call sacred, that which has nurtured me and brought me into the fullness of Catholicity. And so, in closing, to my Orthodox brethren, I want my church, I want my liturgy to enter into the fullness of communion with a historic C. But in order for that to happen, we need to be seen as those who are bringing to you an extension of a part of orthodoxy that was lost in the Great Schism. This pretense that somehow nothing was lost, the fullness of the church continued, is just false. I liked what I think it's, I forget who says it, but there's an Anglican who said, if you have a mirror and that mirror is one, and then the mirror is broken in two, you can say that the mirror still accomplishes its purpose of showing a reflection, but you can't say that it was the same that it once was, or that it's the fullness of what it once was. It isn't. That's the same with schism. In the Great Schism, Orthodoxy and Rome lost something. They lost something. And Orthodoxy is kicking and screaming, refusing to receive and recover that which was lost. And until they do, I do not believe that they will be able to have the influence that they wish to have, nor do I believe that the church will move in a unifying direction. And that breaks my heart, and that is why I'm making this video. I hope that it gives some of my Eastern Orthodox friends pause to think. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree. Share below what you think. But this is the position of an Anglo-Catholic who sees his church less of a church and more as a devotional monastic pattern of prayer that he desires one day to be brought more fully into communion with the reality of the historic church. That's all I got to say, guys. I hope you have a wonderful evening or morning whenever you're watching this, and I will talk to you next time.